Okay, so as previously mentioned, I want to talk about today's big political news. The biggest political news, arguably, since the general election in 2024. It's been a huge day politically. Very, very briefly, before I get into this, just to add a little bit to my last video, there's been a report that the Taliban has deliberately ignored female victims in the Afghanistan earthquake. So that makes a mockery of their claim to be for women's rights or respect women's rights. If that's true, it means that the death toll of 1,400 could be considerably higher. The other news today was that the Duchess of Kent has passed away at the age of 92. It would be fair to say she's not a high profile member of the royal family, but she was the oldest member of the royal family. And she, by all accounts, she was seen as a compassionate person, famously seen comforting a young tennis player. She also was passionate about education and issues around that. Honestly, I didn't know a great deal about her, but I knew that she was the first senior member of the royal family to convert to Catholicism since the Act of Settlement in 1701. So she was notable for that reason. But I think it's fair to say not a particularly high profile member of the royal family. Um, her husband, the Duke of Kent, is often seen on the balcony of the palace. So I think it's fair to say he looks his age. He looks quite frail. So it's a generation of the royal family that is now moving on from the death of the Queen, if I could put it that way. Um, so today's big political news: Angela Rayner has resigned, or she's been forced out, or probably a combination of both. Um, the thing that strikes me about this, I'm going to get into the coverage about the cabinet reshuffle today, but the thing that is striking about this is that the Tory government collapsed because of sleaze, and I think Keir Starmer is acutely aware that his party can't be seen to be hypocritical on this issue. So officially, Rayner has had to leave because of improprieties over her stamp tax and her second property in Hove, East Sussex. It's really part of the city of Brighton and Hove. And vandals have targeted that and accused her of being a tax dodger. Now, only yesterday, Simon Kellner had a piece in the newspaper, it might have been 2 days ago, where he was defending Rayner and saying that she's being picked on because she's a northerner. I don't really accept that. I think if she is indeed guilty of these improprieties, there cannot be one rule for politicians and another for everyone else. It just can't. And Kimmy Badenoch has jumped on this. She said finally Starmer has acted. Rayner should have been out days ago. Well, Badenoch certainly is in no position to lecture, given her party was absolutely riddled with sleaze, and given that when she became Tory leader, she claimed that people should move on from Partygate. The lesson here is obvious that senior politicians, whether they be Tory or Labour, cannot think that they are above scrutiny if the public are penalised for the same thing. Now, in the grand scheme of things, it's probably not the crime of the century. And there will be grassroots Labour people who will be very sad to see Rayner go. The Prime Minister himself was defending her until very recently. He was saying that she's a success story. And it's widely known that this is a woman who went from being a single mother at 16 to being Deputy Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. Her story isn't that different from the late John Prescott. She came from genuinely working class background. She's plain speaking similarities to Prescott. Prescott, of course, got into controversy over his supposedly champagne socialism. But people forget John Prescott played a very big part in introducing the minimum wage. And I think it's unfortunate that he's more remembered for punching a Welsh farmer who assaulted him than the fact he improved many, many lives by helping to bring in the minimum wage. Likewise, well, it may be difficult to point to something Angela Rayner's done in the same way, but I don't know. I remember when she famously called the Tories scum, and it was seen as on diplomatic and all the rest of it. And unfortunately, it came the week before, or shortly before, Sir David Amess was murdered. But there is something to be said about plain speaking. Very often it's said that politicians are detached and they don't think like ordinary people. So I think there is something to be said about plain speaking politicians who frankly aren't that politically correct. One of the critiques of the House of Commons is that parliamentary procedure sometimes is too dogged, too rigid. I personally think that if you're in public life, you should be professional. But I think that, I want to know what people think if I'm going to vote for them or not. I mean, if I'm a Tory voter, I'd rather know that Angela Rayner hates me rather than pretends to be nice to me. Then I think, okay, I won't vote for her. Is it not better to have plain speaking in that sense, to have honesty? And I think that where it crosses a line, definitely they should be criticised. But I think there is something to be said about plain speaking. But I don't agree with Simon Kellner that Rayner is a victim because she's a northerner. And actually, it could be argued that there's sort of a reverse snobbery from the left, because you may have a Tory MP who comes from the home counties and went to Eton. He or she may be actually face reverse snobbery. I mean, Rees-Mogg has come under a lot of scrutiny because of his posh accent and the way he speaks. What's the difference? Both Angela Rayner and Jacob Rees-Mogg are stereotyped. They're both pigeonholed for the way they speak and act. In the case of Rees-Mogg, a lot of the criticism is well deserved because he has some pretty extreme views. But anyway, clearly Starmer's felt the need to have a big reshuffle. I wonder about some of these moves. I wonder how necessary it really is. One that I find striking is David Lammy. Honestly, I think David Lammy was quite a good foreign secretary. I like the way he was very vocal about Israel. I like the fact he was very vocal about Russia. I actually think Lammy was quite a good foreign secretary, so I'm not really sure why Starmer felt the need to, what many would be considered demotion, because he's now no longer one of the great officers of state. What are the great officers of state? Prime Minister, Chancellor of the Exchequer, Foreign Secretary, Home Secretary. The point about Deputy Prime Minister is it's not actually an institution that was created. It's something that's really at the discretion of Prime Ministers. There's not actually a necessity to have a Deputy Prime Minister in this country. It's never been, unlike the office of Vice President in the United States, it's never been an established role. And it's something that's only really been around since the Second World War, when Herbert Morrison and Clement Attlee were sort of seen as Churchill's deputies. It's never really been something that has been established, so it's not actually necessary to have a Deputy Prime Minister. But Lammy is now Deputy Prime Minister and Justice Secretary. And I think I'll start with Lammy, actually. I'm just going to go through the independence analysis on today's reshuffles. The big one that's staying put, not really surprising, is Rachel Reeves. Prime Ministers hardly ever move on Chancellors, because when they do, it usually symbolises the end of a government. I'll just say briefly too about Nigel Farage and his party gloating about today's events. I think it's delusional to think that reformers are going to form the next government. I really don't think that's going to happen. I think they may make big inroads. I think they may gain some more MPs. But, for example, Nadine Dorris defecting to reform is not that surprising. Nadine Dorris has been, she was a Boris Johnson sycophant. I'm really not surprised. I don't care about the fate of the Tories. I think they deserve their fate, but the infighting between the Tories, or not infighting, but the fighting between the Tories and Reform could be one sort of respite for Keir Starmer, because otherwise all the attention would be on the problems the government's having. I will say this though, sorry, I have to say this before I get into the analysis. I can't help but feel that this is a government that won a general election with a landslide and has squandered so much of it. I can't think of a precedent. I mean, in 2010, David Cameron became Prime Minister, but it was through a coalition government. Starmer should be still in a honeymoon period, really. Even if you want to argue we're in a more cynical age than 1997, for a party to win a landslide, to force their rivals to have the worst general election result in their history, the Tories were decimated down to 121 seats. Really, Starmer should be in a strong position, yet one feels he isn't. I think they are tone deaf on the two-tier justice allegations. I think he has failed to handle the free speech debate effectively, although some of the points he makes are valid. I just think on too many areas Starmer's been tone deaf, and he's managed to polarise both the left and the right. Even though in recent weeks there's been overtures to the right, apparently it's been not enough to dissuade right-wing opinion. Because if you look at these sort of headlines like we're going to deport you if you come here illegally, the comments are not welcoming it. They're treating it with skepticism. So Labour has managed to polarise just about everyone. And it's I can't think of a situation where a government has went from such a success to such polarisation in the space of 14 months. Anyway, I'll just go through some of the reshuffles today. The big ones, and I'll go quickly through the other ones as well. Bear with me because it's good analysis from the Independent. There may be more to say about the subject depending how things pan out. Farage, like I say, he's talking about prepare for a general election in 2027. That's possible. But honestly, Reform was not going to go from 6 MPs to winning a general election. I just don't think that will happen. They may do enough. They may do enough to become the official opposition, but that would mean government in 8 years, not 3 or 4 years, and that's a big ask. Right, where are we here? I'm kind of multitasking now on this new laptop, which I've got. I think I can read the article and record at the same time. Right, so Keir Starmer has launched a major cabinet reshuffle after Angela Rayner's resignation. Let's see here. Who's in and who's out? Out, Angela Rayner. Miss Rayner will need to be replaced at least as Housing Secretary, and Sir Keir could pick a new Deputy Prime Minister following her departure. Well, today it's been announced. I'm not sure when this was published, actually. Let's see. Friday the 5th of September, 8:21. Well, I think when that was printed, David Lammy had already been named as Deputy Prime Minister alongside Justice Secretary. Anyway. She has come under mounting pressure to quit after avoiding a £40,000 stamp duty bill when purchasing the seaside property in Hove. The Prime Minister's independent ethics advisor, Sir Laurie Magnus' conclusion that she had breached the ministerial code by ignoring calls to seek specialist tax advice sealed her fate on Friday. The way he worded that sounded like a line out of Yes, Prime Minister. Out. Lucy Powell. Lucy Powell was sacked as leader of the House of Commons after Ms Rayner's departure. Critics believe she had underperformed in the role, and she came under fire after dismissing the grooming gang scandal as a dog whistle issue. That was a very stupid thing to say, and callous, actually, to the young victims. She leapt to Ms Rayner's defence in the wake of the stamp duty scandal, claiming critics were only having a go at the Deputy Prime Minister because she is so bloody good at her job. Well, that's, that just shows the same sort of arrogance that the Tories had when they were defending their colleagues. They just don't get public anger on the perception of one rule for them and another rule for everyone else. It's been an honour to serve in the first Labour government in 15 years, Ms Powell said. She highlighted her work to modernise the Commons, including tightening the rules on MPs' second jobs. Oh, but she's fine defending Rayner in her discretions. These are the changes the Labour government can and should be making, she added. Yeah, I think she had to go. I mean, I think her attitude to the grooming gangs is a disgrace. Tone deaf, disgraceful. I think she had to go for sure. Let's see here. Out, Ian Murray. Another minister sacked in the reshuffle was Scottish Secretary Ian Murray, who for years was Labour's only MP north of the border. After a sweeping success in last summer's general election, Labour has tens of MPs in Scotland, giving Sir Keir plenty of options to replace outgoing Mr Murray. That was one of Labour's big success stories, rebounding in Scotland. Mr Murray said he was hugely disappointed to be leaving government with so much done and so much more to do. And he warned politics in the UK is at a dangerous crossroads, adding that it is the responsibility of all in public life to make an argument for progressive change that brings prosperity, hope and our communities together. Moved. The Independent labels this moved. I say it's definitely a promotion. Shabana Mahmood, who is widely praised in government as having handled the Justice Secretary brief expertly, is being moved to the tougher task of getting a grip in the Home Office. The court's backlog has been a key focus of her brief, but the daughter of immigrants of Kashmiri origin, she's also been drawn into immigration policy that will form much of her new day job. Miss Mahmood will take over from Yvette Cooper with small boat crossings at a record high and tensions mounting over the use of asylum hotels to house asylum seekers. The most senior Muslim woman in government, she backs her care after she said that Britain risks becoming an island of strangers in May, although she avoided the term. She might well be seen as a sort of Labour Priti Patel or Suella Braverman, and I'm not just saying that because she's South Asian, because she's a right winger within the party. Now, I think she was a decent Justice Secretary. But she was at odds with Lord Timpson, who said we punish too many people. Shabana Mahmood took a harder line on justice. She said, for example, that if we have to release people early, there should be tougher community sentencing. So it'll be interesting to see how she does in the Home Office. It's often seen as a poison chalice. I mean, Cooper's only been in that role for 14 months, relatively short. The Home Office, I think, of all the great offices of state, it's seen as, in some ways, the most difficult, particularly at the moment. Not that any of those roles are easy, but I think it's definitely one of the most demanding at this particular time. So, it's definitely a promotion from Justice to the Home Office. Moved. And this is a lateral movement. I wouldn't say it's a promotion or a demotion, it's lateral. To make room for Miss Mahmood in the Home Office, Miss Cooper has been rotated into the Foreign Office. She will represent the UK on the world stage amid the ongoing war in Ukraine, Israel's ongoing military campaign in Gaza, and growing concerns about the influence of China. She's come under fire as Home Secretary for failing to take quick enough action to cut the number of small boats crossing the English Channel. Now, the fact that she hasn't been demoted suggests to me that the Prime Minister still holds her in high regard, and I think a lot of Labour people do. She's an experienced politician. And only recently I was talking about the crime issue. Cooper was talking about a summer blitz on crime, having a higher police presence to tackle thugs and yobs, as she put it, in town centres. Now, I welcome that, but why just summer? People want to see this year round. And we don't want a situation where the police are arresting people or their presence is deterring antisocial behaviour, only for soft judges to give them a tap on the wrist. But clearly she hadn't quite got a grip on that poison chalice, which is the Home Office. I mean, Labour's got a problem here because the actual number of crossings has actually dropped, and yet the optics is that it's still out of control. It may be because the migrants are coming over on bigger boats, perhaps fewer boats, but bigger boats. So it depends how that's looked at. But it is an unenviable position, and Shabana Mahmood's going to have a work cut out. But from Home Office to Foreign Office is not a demotion or a promotion; it's lateral. My thing with Yvette Cooper is, will she take a hard line on China? As much as I think Lamy was a good Foreign Secretary, like the rest of the government, I think he was too soft on China. I want to see Cooper being more outspoken on China, a lot more outspoken. And we'll see how that plays out. I'm not going to be optimistic because the history of governments in this country has been, apart from Dominic Raab and Liz Truss, most ministers in British governments over the last 20 years have been soft on China. That's the truth. Gavin Williamson was more of a hawk, I'll give him that. Gavin Williamson, Dominic Raab and Liz Truss are the only ministers I can think of in the last 20 years that took a harder, more hawkish approach to China, and they were right to do so. So what I want to see from Yvette Cooper is a consistent approach to Ukraine. I'm sure that will be the case, but I want to see her being more hawkish on China. Okay, let's continue. Move, David Lammy. David Lammy was also part of the puzzle when it came to making way for Miss Mahmood at the Home Office. He has been moved from Foreign Secretary to Justice Secretary, filling the spot vacated by Miss Mahmood. Now, that's a demotion without question. Justice Secretary is not one of the great offices of state, but it's kind of been given, the smile words, the Deputy Prime Minister post might be sort of a bit of, I guess, to placate that demotion. Mr Lammy will be expected to push through a series of reforms Labour has championed aimed at reducing the capacity crisis plaguing Britain's prisons, as well as reducing reoffending rates. He's also been handed Miss Rayner's Deputy Prime Minister title, so will stand in for secure events such as PMQs when the PM is away. My concern about this is, whilst I felt he was quite a good Foreign Secretary, I am suspicious of his role in justice. Why? Because it's David Lammy who apparently was in favour of this idea of in the sentencing review looking at the background of offenders, i.e., sentencing should be factored in on whether they come from minority backgrounds and whether they're women or not. Now, that if that is his position, and if that's something the Sentencing Council endorses, that is a very serious problem in terms of two-tier justice, and the government can't rationally claim that they're not promoting two-tier justice. So Lammy will come under a lot of scrutiny over his position on crime. Put bluntly, is he soft on crime? You know, as a London MP, he has certainly dealt first-hand with issues like stabbings and street gangs. He's no stranger to that, but he needs to reassure the public that he doesn't believe in two-tier justice. That will be the big scrutiny of Lammy in this role, I think. At least that would be my question. Move to Pat McFadden. Pat McFadden, currently Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, which is a non-position, is moving from the Cabinet Office to head up a new so-called super ministry covering the Department of Work and Pensions and part of the Department for Education. In a move aimed at cutting the spiralling welfare bill and boosting economic growth, his new department will cover the benefit system as well as the skills remit, currently part of DFE. This was Kendall's old position. I'm going to come to her in a second. Pat McFadden, like Liz Kendall, is seen as a hardliner on this issue. And I forget the source earlier, but it was saying that McFadden may be pushing for another amendment to welfare. The left will not be happy about this. If he's as hardline as Liz Kendall was, it will mean more difficulty for disabled claimants. And this is where Labour is seriously costing, polarising the political left, along with the issue on Gaza. Because right now Labour is just as callous as the Tories were when it comes to welfare, and that is an utter disgrace. And it's one reason I won't be voting for Labour in the next general election, at least. I'll be reluctant to. So I'm not optimistic about that. What I would have wanted to see in the welfare department is more compassion, not more of the same. Moved, Liz Kendall. You see, I'd be celebrating her movement if it wasn't for the fact that McFadden's just as bad as she is. Previously serving as Work and Pension Secretary, Liz Kendall has been moved to take over as Science, Innovation and Technology Secretary. The MP for Lesser West has served her constituency since 2010 and been at the Department for Work and Pensions since Labour came to power in 2024. Moved, Steve Reid. Steve Reid has been picked to take Miss Rayner's job as Housing Secretary. Mr Reid is currently the Environment Secretary, has significant local government experience. He was the leader of Lambeth Council for more than 6 years before being elected to Parliament in 2012, a role which saw him intervene on council tax, social housing and children's services. He is impressed by standing firm on the farm tax and challenging water companies on sewage spills and his role in the Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs. That's not going to make much headlines. Move, Peter Kyle. Peter Kyle is also to move from his role as Science, Innovation and Technology Secretary to Business Secretary, replacing Jonathan Reynolds. In his former job, he was responsible for managing the UK's growing AI sector and supporting high-tech innovation. He has been seen as a rising star in the party and is one of Labour's stronger media performers, with the move marking a promotion. Peter Kyle is not a senior minister, but he does seem to get quite a lot of media attention, so he's someone to watch, I think. Emma Reynolds, and I assume they're no relation, Wickham MP Emma Reynolds was first elected to Parliament in Wolverhampton North East, that's a constituency I lived in at one point, in 2010, but served the Buckinghamshire constituency since 2024. She was appointed to her previous role as City Minister after the resignation of Tulip Siddiq. Ms Siddiq stood down following allegations of corruption in Bangladesh. She is moving from her roles as an Economic Secretary to the Treasury and City Minister to become Sir Keir Starmer's new Environment, Food and Rural Affairs Secretary. Moved, Douglas Alexander. Douglas Alexander is returning to a role he held nearly 2 decades ago and replacing Ian Murray as he is appointed Secretary of State for Scotland. He served in the same role under Tony Blair from 2006 to 2007, as well as being appointed Transport Secretary before he was moved to become Secretary of State for International Development under Gordon Brown. He has moved more recently as Minister of State for Trade Policy and Economic Security in the Department for Business and Trade and Minister of State in the Cabinet Office. Move Jonathan Reynolds, another Reynolds. Let's see here, we have Jonathan Reynolds, Emma Reynolds, two Reynolds, but they're no relation. Let's see here, where am I? Bear with me. Jonathan Reynolds will leave his position as Business Secretary and take on a new role as Parliamentary Secretary to the Treasury, also known as the Chief Whip. It's an influential and important position and is responsible for ensuring all Labour MPs attend debates and vote in the direction desired by the party leadership. So it's not one of the great offices of state, but it's an important role, and that will be critical if there's any other welfare bill. Move Sir Alan Campbell. Jonathan Reynolds' predecessor as Chief Whip will now become Lord President of the Council and Leader of the House of Commons. He takes over the role from Lucy Powell, who has left the government today and will attend Cabinet. Sir Campbell has been an MP continuously since 1997 and represents Tynemouth. So a safe pair of hands, I think we can say. Staying put, Rachel Reeves. Rachel Reeves is the one Cabinet Minister guaranteed safety so far in Sir Keir's top team. The PM has linked his fate to that of the Chancellor despite criticism of her first budget as having put the brakes on economic growth and sparked a wave of job losses. The economy is central to Labour's hopes of turning around its dire polling and staying in part in the next general election, and Miss Reeves' November fiscal statement will make or break for the government. Newly appointed Darren Jones. Darren Jones made headlines earlier this month as it was announced he would take over as Chief Secretary to the Prime Minister. Today's reshuffle sees him remain in that role, but also take on the job of Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, a historical appointment that now sees its incumbent take on the advisory role to the PM. He's also the youngest member of Cabinet, only 38. So, that's a reshuffle. I wonder were some of those moves necessary. It's often thought that when there's a big reshuffle in government, it suggests a Prime Minister who's worried about polling. And I'm sure Keir Starmer is. I'm not really sure about the reshuffling from Lammy to Justice. I can't see any reason why Starmer would have been unhappy with him in the Foreign Office. And the fact that Cooper has been moved from the Home Office to the Foreign Office suggests that Starmer trusts her. She hasn't been demoted, so she should be happy. What else? Some of those other positions aren't going to get a huge number of headlines. But, they all affect lives in some way or another. For me, I'll be watching Pat McFadden in the Welfare Department. I'm not convinced that he'll be any better than Liz Kendall. And it's an absolute disgrace that this Labour government is indistinguishable from the Tories when it comes to the way they treat the unemployed. It's a disgrace. But that's today's news. Rayner, that's a big story, of course, her resignation. But honestly, Starmer's probably acutely aware the last government fell over sleaze. He's had 3 ministerial resignations in recent months. Tulip Sadiq over the scandals she's been connected with in Dhaka. Her aunt was the former Sheikh Hasina, the former president of Bangladesh, or Prime Minister. Then we have Rushanara Ali, the Minister for the Homeless, who, evicted 2 of her tenants, and now Angela Rayner. So Starmer has to be careful. Labour isn't going to become known as the party of sleaze. Anyway, I'll wrap this up. But big day politically. The government will survive, of course it will, and the fact that the Chancellor's staying on in her job is not surprising. It's very rare that Chancellors are demoted or moved in a reshuffle. Kwasi Kwarteng was saying that Reeves' job may be in danger. He had a piece in the eye, but that hasn't transpired. But he did say that relations between number 10 and 11 on his watch were frosty. And it's no secret. As it stands, relations between Starmer and Reeves seem to be okay, because the press love nothing more than signs of dissent between number 10 and number 11. We think of the famous one, Blair and Brown, but other examples too. like Truss and Quartang. So yeah, the government's going to survive, but this is a government that's, I think they've went from, you know, a general election landslide to dire opinion polls. It may well be, I will say this, it may well be that whoever's in government will go through dire opinion polls. It may just be that we're in a more cynical age. You know, in the late 90s there was optimism around. One just doesn't feel that at the moment. It's hard to see a lot of happiness in this country. There's a lot of anger out there. And but reform shouldn't be too triumphalist. I think that any speculation they're going to win the next general election is naive and hyperbole. The Lib Dems are in a strong position. The Greens have just elected a new leader. I haven't given much time to that because I don't give much time to the Greens and I don't take them very seriously. Their new leader once claimed that women could get breast enlargements by hypnosis, and he apologised for it. But yeah, that's the leader of the Green Party. He apparently wants green populism, but seriously, I mean, if they really want to get into populism, they should consider that their support of Just Stop Oil was massively unpopular. So I don't take the Greens seriously. I mean, I don't think they're ever going to be much more than a big protest party. I don't take them seriously.